I'm going to show you a quick demo on how to use the PID template with its macros. This particular demo is with a PID for CMI for development, but since the same macros run, you could use this even as an illustration for the PIDs for CMI for services. What I've provided all of you is with a standard PID, and it will be named maturity level 5 or maturity level 3, and then the model with the PID name. So this particular demo is with, of course, maturity level 5 dev PID. And what I would typically do with this is to rename it to the name of the project. So here I have one called project 1 PID. Secondly, what I can do is create a separate folder or a place or a location, even a shared drive, where I will keep data relating to the project or the group for which artifacts are being collected in the PID. In this particular example, I have this folder called initial data, and below that I have a folder called project 1. Under project 1, because this is dev, so I have data relating to work management, support, and engineering. My suggestion remains that if the data isn't too big, just create these 3 folders and put artifacts in each one of them. Avoid too many subfolders. It makes the initial macros run slowly, though it actually doesn't affect any particular aspect of the execution of the PID when we're using it. Once we have the artifacts here of course I've put in dummy artifacts, but the idea is that these artifacts are put in because they are considered relevant for the project for which the PID is being built. What I'm now going to do is open the PID for the project. This is an empty PID. The current versions of Excel will open it with a security warning saying that macros have been disabled, depending on, of course, your Excel options. In this case, I have the security option set. So I have to go to options and enable content. The macros do not work if the macros are not enabled or if the PID Excel is in shared mode. Now here we have the PID open. I have listed certain known issues which you can look at. The instructions are longer. You can always refer to them when you have the time. But typically, if you've started putting your artifacts together, what you also need to do is now start mapping it to the model process area. If you see this particular process area, requirements management has 17 practices. Just now nothing is mapped against it. Therefore, I have this count in white text on a pinkish background which says 17. That means none of these 17 practices have any artifacts which are mapped to it. Let's assume that I have an artifact called abc.pdf which I want to map for the specific practice 1.1. This is one way of adding it in. I get a message. What I'm told is that there are no artifacts in artifact list. Should I continue? If you want to directly type in the artifact names, you can. We need to make sure that the artifacts are unique. That means we don't put duplicate artifacts or the same artifact in multiple folders. We need to just keep it at one place. By saying yes, I've said, okay, I know that I'll put in this artifact, but I have not yet put it into an artifact list. Example, if I were to put the artifact name here, the file name extension is very important. If I put abc.pdf here, you will see that in requirements management that it is related to an artifact in the artifact list, and the row number where it is finding this link is 2, and that you can see out here. This is row 2. If I were to write a second artifact, I will see that the first artifact which is there in the list will have a purple color in these columns ABC, while all duplicates, and I can show you as many duplicates as you may want to do, they will all show up as red, and in column C it will point to the row number where the first instance of this duplicate is. So the idea being that we need to keep only one copy of an artifact and not multiple copies. When you have multiple copies, we have challenges during evaluation, especially in appraisals, when if the copies are not identical, different appraisal team members could be looking at different copies of the same artifact and coming to conflicting or varying conclusions. So we just keep a single copy. You can enter the artifact names out here directly. However, that will not help us build a list of locations. I will show how you can work with the folder that we had created. So we had created this folder under initial data called project 1. So I will traverse to this folder and get all the artifacts listed under this folder into my artifact list here, because this becomes my original set of artifacts that I may want to keep as reference. And for this, I use this macro button called artifact consolidation. Once I click it, it will open up a window where I have to browse for the folder. If you have it on a shared drive, either you may have to map that shared drive to you, or you will have to find it through my network places. As a PID demo, initial data, project 1. Once I've selected the project, I click on OK, and you can see that this macro is populating all the artifacts and the links for it. You're also going to see some duplicates. In this particular demonstration, the .ds underscore store file is getting duplicated. These are system files. So all temporary and system files also get picked up by this macro, and if they are duplicates, they will show up. At times it may be difficult to remove these duplicates. In such situations, we will just live with them. Otherwise, it's a good idea not to have duplicates, especially those that can be evaluated. Now if I look out here, abc.pdf has again got mapped. It has got mapped to row 23. So let's have a look in artifact list, row 23, and we'll see abc.pdf. When I put my abc.pdf here, I would have also noticed that in the second row of the process area in column C, the count of unmapped practices has gone down to 60. Let me add another name, and this time instead of typing in directly, I can also use this particular list. Now, how well this list shows up is a bit of an Excel constraint. So in some versions of Excel, I can expand this list a little bit. In this particular one, I can't. And so you will have to scroll down it. Here, the artifacts are named exactly in the order in which they are listed in artifact list. And so you will have to scroll down to the right one. So let's assume I say article 6 is the one. The moment I select it, my cross-referencing builds up. This count of unmapped practices goes down to 15. If I choose a new strange file, def.pdf, I will again say artifact not in list. I will say yes to continue. I see that in column D, I have a count 1, which says that there's one artifact in this whole collection. It doesn't seem to be available in the artifact list. My artifact list is actually the complete inventory of stuff that I have available, which would be used to map or to build the PID. So def.pdf is obviously a problem because I haven't got it anywhere. Let me try and make it available here. So I go to project 1, put that as an engineering artifact. Now this is not enough. I will, when I add such a artifact into my folders, I will need to run this macro once more. So every time you change the contents of the project folders, you will need to rerun the artifact consolidation macro. I will get this message complete, and I will also see that these have got mapped. Any unmapped practices show up here. Any strange names which are not anywhere will definitely show up in column D. So column C and D of any process area, whether I look at REQM or any other PA, will show me how many things are outstanding. And in this case now 13 practices are not yet mapped, and one of the mappings, that is this one, we have an issue because there is no cross reference which is available in artifact list, which means I have, at least till the last time this macro was run, no artifacts were put in into the folder list which match this name. I put this a second time, the count of unmapped artifacts also increases. So it doesn't look for duplicates, it just shows you the unmapped artifacts. The practices for which there are no artifacts will always show up in column A with this color pink against the practice name. So that's how you can see which practices are missing or which artifacts are not yet in your collection of artifacts. Let me create a Word document. Let's call it a management artifact. Okay, so creating the document in itself or making the document available in the folder does not solve the issue in itself. I have to put it in artifact list and go through the artifact consolidation macro. Run this macro a second time. If I see there are no artifacts which are there for which there's no list or they're not available in the artifact list. All of them are available here. However, there's one more step which is left in the PID to make it really easy to work. If I were to be on this page and click any of these artifacts like def.pdf on the link, this artifact would open up. Let me now run my second macro. There are only two macros in this PID. The second copies these hyperlinks into the individual PIDs wherever you have put them. So let's put these. This worked faster because I've only done a few mappings. So in requirements management, now I have all of these available. Let's just go to pqr.docx mapping sp1.5. It says for sp1.5 pqr.docx is a relevant artifact. I can click on it. As I click on it, it'll open up and show you the contents. And this is how the PID is supposed to work. You create a mapping of relevant artifacts to illustrate the implementation of these practices. Now, besides the names of the artifacts, what else do we do? Well, if the artifact is very big, then you may want to point to a section of it. So let's see in abc.pdf, I want to refer to, let's say, reporting organization categories. So I can either refer to slide 7 or say reporting organization categories. So I can say out here, if I say this, then it means that this section is likely to have the relevant information. If you want to provide any background context, so this is what I can also provide. Notes and comments are optional. Sections are useful to have, especially when the documents are large. If this is not what you want to write, do another one and say, now if you notice out here, while my cross-reference for the artifact list tab has come in, no hyperlink is coming. For this, I have to run the second macro before the hyperlink can happen. So if I go to artifact list, run hyperlink artifacts, this will get updated. Please note, if you do not have information for any of these process areas because they are scoped out or they're not relevant for a project or particular situation, then you can delete these worksheets. But if you delete these worksheets, adding them again is not possible. You will have to copy this information to a fresh PID. And at this point in time, I do want to discuss a little bit about copying and entering data. While I have directly entered data, sometimes you may want to copy file names, and those file names could be coming, for example, from here. So I believe that this is a relevant one, and what I can do is go into edit mode, copy this file name, Control C, and then I bring it here. When I'm pasting here, when you're pasting names, section names, parts of it, my strong recommendation is paste as values. So if you want to really see that, it would come under home, paste, paste special, and text. In this particular case, I want to copy a portion here, table of contents. I do a Control C and I want to put it out here. Then I would again strongly suggest using paste special, text, or values. This will show up as table of contents. If you double click here, it will show up completely. You can even widen the rows. Columns H and I are optional and do not typically get used, but suppose a particular practice has not yet been performed, and out here you want to say in GP 2.9, so you could say that no audits have been conducted as yet, which basically means that I really do not have any artifact that can illustrate this practice. But whenever you're saying these artifacts or these activities have not been done, there's always a possibility that you may want to show that I'm prepared to do it, which means I have a plan to do this. And so let's assume the plan is in this document. I can put the plan, and I can also call this, I can either put in the notes and or mark it as a file out here, which indicates it's a plan document, the plan to perform this practice, and not really an implementation artifact which illustrates the practice implementation. Column J is not meant for use for those who are filling in the PID, and if you are using it, I would suggest that you can clean it up later, because this is typically for appraisal team members when we are doing readiness reviews to write our comments, which could be then used as comments to improve the PID mapping. This is now one basic set of use of PIDs which you can see out here, and just put in some data, tried a little bit of attempts at filling in the PID, and I've given you the different options available. Now I'm going to go to a slightly advanced method of using this PID which can happen in certain situations. Let's take a situation where something is going to be available on an intranet site. I assume that this particular URL is available. So it's a specific location for which you know the URL. Let's call it project plan on intranet. Just to make it simple, I've actually used a very standard kind of a URL, at least that I can illustrate out here. So you can always put in things like this. This will also be available as a pull down. Let's go GP 2.3. So I want to refer to the project plan on internet. I can always do this, or I can type this in directly and it will do the appropriate mapping. The problem that I have is when I put in these kind of names, these are typically not in the folders where you're keeping artifacts that illustrate implementation of practice, but these are special links or unusual ways of providing information. Whenever you have unusual ways of providing information, I would suggest that that becomes the name of the artifact, and you must have an appropriate link which can be accessed. If you have multiple such things, you can put these on top, and then to make sure that they don't get overwritten with the macros, I have a placeholder called start macro. So when I put the start macro, my artifact consolidation macro will now fill in names only below this. Please remember, it only takes care of the first start macro. So if I write a second start macro, it will not work, and I'll just illustrate it to you. So let me start my macro here. So now if you go to REQM, I have less things left out to map. Let me randomly fill in a few things just so that the count on column C becomes in row 2 of column C becomes 0. Okay, now you can see if I have mapping for all the practices, so this is all sort of greenish with no pink colors. In contrast, PP still has 26 practices which are outstanding. If I run or hyperlink artifact macro, it will complete the mapping for each of the artifacts which are identified for this particular process area. In column D, a link is taken in. This link is coming from whatever was in the artifact list. So if I go to my project plan intranet, this will open. It opens the Google page. I'm going to just run this in a little different manner just to highlight a few things. If I write a second start macro and run artifact consolidation, let's see what happens. The second start macro is not taken care of. So this particular artifact consolidation macro is designed only to start off after the first such statement called start macro. If you have to do multiple such statements, then you will need to create a different solution. So I have this first start macro. Now I will handle this in a slightly different manner. There is a situation where we have multiple projects being looked at, and for each project there may be a common set of artifacts which you don't want to repeat for everyone. So what I'm doing is, I've got a start macro here. I can run my artifact consolidation and go to PIID Demo, initial artifacts, the common artifacts first. I've got my links for the common artifacts done. Now once I've done this, I can remove this start macro, leave it as an empty line if need be. That's an overhead that comes in out here. Write a start macro here. This will now mean that these links are not going to be overwritten when I run my artifact consolidation for the project. The reason I'm doing all this because there is a limit of 500 such entries that I have put into the artifact list. My rationale is simple. If we have far too many artifacts, then as appraisal team members, we have a lot of difficulty, or we need a lot of time to understand what's going on. So 500 in my opinion was a reasonably big limit within which information illustrating the various practices of the model can be illustrated at least for one instance of a project or a group. I just want to show you one more feature, and that's when I will stop for the time being. I update a count of how many times any particular item in the artifact name is being referred to. Duplicates will always have 0 because the macro picks up the first such instance whenever we have duplicate artifacts. This way I can see how many artifacts are provided in artifact list which are never referred to. For example, this much. It's a fairly large number. Right, and in contrast, if I look at the non-zero values, I have a bit. I'm seeing that this particular item in row 11 has been referred to twice. So I don't know which practices or which PS. That's something that I have not built into this. pqr.docx has been linked 3 times. There are certain other things that can be done with this PID, especially when you have to transfer a PID, an existing PID to another one. If you want to know that, at present, I'll suggest that you contact me.